All right, back to our series of animals in the Bible. And today we're going to talk about bugs. Now, I'll say this, that Sunday I mentioned, I'm probably not on, Brayden. Zachary, I'm sorry. Aha, okay. Sunday I mentioned, I'm going to use the word bugs, okay? But I know that technically it's probably not bugs. There's other names for them. But I'm going to use the word bugs for everything that's creepy, crawly, spiders, all those kinds of things, right? Even worms, I would call it a bug. And somebody already corrected me. It's not a bug. Okay, bug, insect, spider, invertebrates, arthropods. Okay, I throw all those names out there. You can plug them in wherever they go. But I'm talking about bugs in general, layman's terms, all right, of all these creeping things. And if you think that that's too vague, wait till you see how vague the Bible is on these creatures. But it is interesting. I'm not even going to hit all of them, I'm sure. But I want to mention some of these creepy, crawly bug things that the Bible mentions, all right? So first of all, let's go to we're going to end up in Genesis, but we're going to be all over the place. So let me see. Where do these fall into the Bible? Because we categorized everything before. You got cattle, you got beasts, you've got fowl, you got fish, and then the last one that's left is creeping things. So it stands to reason that these bugs I'm talking about would be considered creeping things in the Bible, right? So let's look at that first. We'll be in Genesis, but I guess we're not ready to go there yet. Let's go to Leviticus first. Now, Leviticus, if you remember, I've been there a few times where we talk about clean versus unclean, what animals they could eat during this period where they were under the Old Testament law regarding the different dietary laws. So that's the context of where we are here. Leviticus chapter 11. Leviticus 11, look at verse 20. All fowls that creep, going upon all four, shall be an abomination unto you. So now what do you mean, all fowl that creep? Right. It's interesting. So here's I'm going to put it this way. Are all these bugs I'm talking about, are they considered creeping things? My answer would be this. If they creep, they're called creeping things. Okay? If they creep, they're called creeping things. What is it talking about? Fowl that creep. Actually, I have heard some strange interpretations of this. I've heard some people say that there was this prehistoric, what most people call prehistoric, kind of like a pterodactyl or something like that, and it flew, but it also crawled on all fours, because they said otherwise it doesn't make sense. And this is one of those examples I've told you about people they get this thing in their head and they're like, oh, I got to make the Bible fit, what my mind thinks about the Scripture. Well, really, number one, crawling on all fours is just, number one, just a way of saying it crawls, right? Crawling on all fours. But if you look at a lot of bugs, and an example of that would be, like, let's say a praying mantis, a grasshopper, different creatures like that. They're literally crawling on four legs, and then they have these other, what we call legs, up here that are actually hands or arms, the Bible would call them. All right, so it's not really weird to say it's crawling on all fours because it's pretty much just the four legs that it's crawling on, and then it has these. But then it says fowl that creep. So people say, no, see, it's talking about a bird that creeps. Well, do you know what the word fowl means? If you look up the etymology of the word, it means fly. Okay, something that flies. And that's just the general, God was just talking about all these things that fly. And so he called them fowl. And so that's what we know. So when it's talking about fowl that are creeping, it's talking actually about certain types of bugs. And you can see that whenever you keep reading. So where did we leave off there? Leviticus 11, verse 20. All fowls that creep going upon all four shall be an abomination unto you. Yet these may ye eat of every flying, creeping thing. So there you go. It's a flying, creeping thing that goeth upon all fours, which have legs above their feet, to leap withal upon the earth. Even these of them ye may eat. The locust. Anybody want to eat some locusts after church tonight? After his kind. The bald locust after his kind. And the beetle after his kind. The little greenfield kind. And the grasshopper after his kind. Chocolate-covered grasshoppers. You ever heard of those? Some people love them. I'm not talking about the cookies, the chocolate cookies with the mint inside it. I'm talking about actual grasshoppers, right? It's a delicacy in some places. You can eat all those. Those are clean animals. All right? They're creeping things, flying, creeping things. And if you didn't know about the bugs being edible, look at Matthew chapter 3. Matthew chapter 3. Actually, they have cookbooks that you can get that show you how to properly prepare bugs. Matthew chapter 3, verse 4. Here's our hero, John the Baptist. And the same John had his raiment of camel's hair and a leathern girdle about his loins, and his meat was locusts and wild honey. I've yet to try it, but you just take one of them locusts, dip it in honey, and I'm sure, it tastes like honey-covered chicken. Something. All right, so they ate bugs as well. So to me, this leads to a logical conclusion. When we talk about clean animals, unclean animals, where I keep going in this series is like, well, what about the ark? What does the Bible say about certain creatures that were on the ark? Somebody might say, were bugs on the ark? Did Noah take 2 of every mosquito and put it on the ark? 2 of every fly, 2 of every worm, 2 of every kind of bug that's out there. Well, let's turn to Genesis. Genesis chapter 7. Genesis chapter 7, look at verse 23. And every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and the creeping things and the fowl of the air, fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth all 150 days. If I was going to read that and just be totally logical, I would say, man, everything died except for what was in the ark, and so whatever's left had to have been on the ark. So you say, Brother Rocky, do you believe that mosquitoes and all those kind of things were on the ark? No, actually I don't, because look at verse 22. This is my understanding. Now, I know you could take that literally and say, now it said every creature, all right? But verse 22 says, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land died, all right? I think there's something there about, he's specifically talking about animals who had the breath of life in them, in their nostrils and all, Look, I don't understand. I proved that last Sunday night. I don't understand science that well. But bugs, what I'm calling bugs, the majority, the majority of them have what's called spiracles. I had this down earlier, which basically are like holes in their exoskeleton that allows that air to get into them. And they can even go underwater. Some of them can go underwater for longer periods of time than others, but they don't breathe in the same way we do. So just like nowhere in that list does it talk about fish being on the ark, Noah didn't have a big fish bowl with 2 goldfish in it, right? I don't believe that, even though I've seen that in little children's books, right? They were in the water. They're fine. They can live through that. And I believe that majority of bugs, I'm sure a whole lot of them died, but the majority of the different species of bugs that were alive during that time probably survived it fine, all right? And so, and that's one of the reasons probably there's so many bugs, right? Because just like the fish, not only did they survive, many of them survived the flood. I mean, think about it, after a flood, right? If you go into parts of the country that have been under heavy, heavy flood, well, I'll tell you one thing that survived just fine are the bugs. And they thrive in those kind of climates, it seems like. So anyway, and then just the way that they multiply, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's one thing about bugs. There's just so many of them. And Iola, I think, was built on an anthill. And so, like, every year, it's just like the ants are going to pick our house up and carry it off or something because they're everywhere, man. And I was on the trail today. This is a bad time of year if you don't like bugs. I was on the trail today running, and there's some kind of bug. I don't know what it was, but it wouldn't leave me alone, and it kept wanting to go inside my hair. It was like a big fly of some sort, and I'm just, like, running the whole time, and it's just like, ugh. You know about bugs? They bug me. That's why they're called bugs. Well, that's why we say that word or something. I don't know. But bugs, they're pests, right? So I think the key there about the Noah's Ark is about the nostrils and all that. So anyway, that's just some thoughts by introduction. But when I want to talk about the points of the message tonight, here are some of the areas, probably not exhaustive by any means, but here are some of the areas that the Bible some points that the Bible makes, I guess, the context of how bugs are used. Okay, so point number one is this. And again, I know I'm making this word bugs to mean all of these creepy crawlies, but number one is they're seemingly insignificant in size, right? They're just tiny, right? Other than those locusts that come out of hell in Revelation, I don't think they're tiny. But other than that, all these types of bugs are tiny. And the Bible uses that in the context. Okay, look at Isaiah chapter 40. Isaiah chapter 40. Probably most of the times the word grasshopper is used, it's somebody trying to say, we were like grasshoppers in their sight, meaning we were really small or something. So let's look at Isaiah 40, verse 22. And here's the verse. We were only going through Job, we didn't turn here on Sunday night. But here's another great scientific truth found in the Bible. It is He that sitteth upon the circle of the earth. All right. So that's a word that we can use to realize that nobody ever taught in the Bible that the earth was flat. And the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers. Right? There's another verse that says, the earth is, God dwelleth in heaven and the earth is His footstool. Just using this poetic speech about how much greater He is than earth, okay? And so this is kind of using the same analogy here. It's saying, God sits on the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain and spread them out as a tent to dwell in. So he's saying that all humans compared to God are very insignificant, very small, all right? So he uses a grasshopper to talk about that. Let me just read this one to you. Numbers chapter 13, verse 33 says, and there we saw the giants. This is talking about when they went to go spy out the land of Canaan, and they were supposed to go in there and take it. And he says, there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Which was an exaggeration, but he's saying, hey, we were just like, no, these men were huge. We were just like grasshoppers in their sight. And they, we felt like grasshoppers comparing ourselves to them. So the Bible often, when it talks about grasshoppers, it's talking about their insignificant size, how small they are. What is the smallest insect you can think of that is around? I mean, I know they probably get smaller than this, but just one that you can... Chiggers, that's tiny, I guess. I was thinking gnats. Gnats are one of the worst. And again, when I'm running, if I'm sweating and I'm running and I run through a whole bunch of gnats, they get stuck to my face. And I guess fruit flies are something else, but fruit flies are like gnat size. They're not the same thing, though, are they? Fruit flies, man, if you bring some fruit in and it had fruit flies, oh, that's annoying. That's so annoying. But they're so tiny. You're thinking, who cares? They're just, they're just little tiny. No, here's what the Bible says about those. Look at Matthew 23. I love Jesus's when he uses exaggeration, it's kind of comical. Matthew 23:24. He says, "Ye blind guides, which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel." He's saying you're so worried about these little details. It's like, some small thing that's not even significant, man. You strain at that. And at the same time, I can understand that. Have you ever been running or riding your bike or driving or whatever, and a little tiny bug goes in the back of your throat, and you're just like, right? Or if you were drinking water and a bug, well, you just realize, hey, I think that was a bug, that you'd probably start gagging a little bit. So I can kind of relate to that. But his point was, hey, you strain at a gnat, but you swallow a camel, right? So he was exaggerating that the camel's a big animal, the gnat is a little tiny animal. So again, talking about the insect world when it comes to creatures that are really, really tiny, but also they're insignificant in size, but they're numerous. All right. Another way the grasshoppers is used about just being a bunch of them. Judges 6:5 says, "For they came up with their cattle and their tents, and they came as grasshoppers for multitude. For both they and their camels were without number, and they entered into the land to destroy it." So you think about grasshoppers, there's just lots of them. If you go out, there's little bitty grasshoppers, if you go through a field, they'll just all start, You didn't know they were there until you started walking through the grass or whatever, but they're multitudes. So bugs are seemingly insignificant in size, and the Bible uses them in that context whenever it's given illustrations and what have you. Number two, not only are they insignificant in size, they have an ability to spoil or ruin things. All right. I don't get that disgusted if I go to a picnic and flies are landing on my food, but some people are like, "Do you know what those things just landed on?" And now they're coming on your food, and so most people think about bugs as being just something that's disgusting, it's gross, Yeah, I mean, everybody's got roaches at some time or another, but you see a roach and you're like, "Oh, that's a dirty, that must be a dirty person, a dirty house," right? Because it's got roaches and you just feel so gross. I got to go take a shower now. I mean, maybe you're not. I remember this time I went to go work for this guy. It was right after a storm. We were in Oklahoma City, and I kind of needed the money, so I knew a guy that had a tree trimming business, and he had broken one of his arms. And right after the storm, I was like, I bet you he's got a lot of business right now, or he could have. And so I called him up and said, "Hey, if you need any help, I'd be happy to come down, sleep in a sleeping bag, whatever it takes, and work with you for a couple days." And he said, "Oh, come on down." And he put me up in this house that was across the street from his house. And he had an extension cord running from his house over to this house. And he had another guy that helps him from time to time with this business, and he's homeless. And so he kind of works in exchange for some food and a place to stay. He does some work for him. And so I got to sleep in there with this homeless guy with one light. That was it. And it was middle of the winter, really cold. And we had one light, so we had to sleep in the same room so we can kind of get a little bit of heat. And I'm like, I don't know this guy. He was weird. Like the things he talked about, it was kind of like, I don't think I'm going to sleep tonight. Right? And then that light cast just enough light on the wall for me to watch as cockroach after cockroach was just, needless to say, I didn't sleep very well. And it was just the grossest feeling, because bugs are like that, right? So the Bible talks a little bit about how they can spoil things. They seem small, insignificant, but they're typically pretty dirty, nasty creatures. Don't you want to go eat some now? Ecclesiastes chapter 10. Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. A lot of references to animals in Ecclesiastes as well. Here's a good one. Ecclesiastes chapter 10 verse 1 says, "Dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor." Right? So here's this place where they're mixing. Sometimes apothecaries medicines. Sometimes it's just like perfumes. Ointments that smell good, or what's the other word I'm looking for? Incense. I mean, those kinds of things that they mix together. And it says, dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. Now, let's say you bought some, I'm trying to think, it could be anything. I mean, my first thought for some reason was just like something like yogurt or something like that, sour cream or whatever, and it's in your fridge, and you didn't know it, but some bug got in there. How long do you think it would take before that bug dies in there, and before you know it, like the whole thing is just ruined, right? Because that's what happens. But something that even you would expect to be good and holy is the application here, something you'd be good. Well, a dead little, what you think is insignificant and small, right, gets in there and it could cause much damage. It can ruin and spoil everything. So that's a good, a good way of talking about, using that for an illustration. It says, so doth a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. So here's a guy's got a position, of honor. He's got a high space, supposed to be a wise person, an honorable person, and then they find themselves, doing something stupid, a little bit of folly. And it says, man, that's just like a dead fly in the apothecary, the ointment of the apothecary, something that's supposed to be nice and pleasant and fresh and wonderful, and now it's ruined because of a little bit of folly. So what a great example there. But it talks about these bugs' ability to spoil or to ruin things. The Bible talks a lot about different plagues. 3 of the 10 plagues, isn't it 10 plagues? In Egypt, the plagues of Egypt, 3 of those plagues are bugs, what I'm calling bugs. Lice. Now, I don't know exactly what kind of lice, but look, there's another bug. Lice. I don't want to ask it for a show of hands, but if you've ever had lice, no, you don't even have to have lice. If I told you right now that somebody in here had lice, you'd be scratching your head the rest of the night. I'm scratching just thinking about it now, and nobody in here has lice that I know of. That's another thing where you're just like, or bed bugs. I don't think I've ever had a bed bug or seen a bed bug, but just the thought of going into a hotel or something like that and it being infested with bugs. They seem small, they seem insignificant, but man, they can really destroy, ruin things, suck your blood. Is that what a real bug, is that one of the definitions of a bug, that it sucks blood? I'm going to look this up one of these days. I'm itching, look at this. I can't help it. So plagues in the Bible. Let me just read a few of these plagues. Not from Exodus, but Psalm 105 actually talks about the plagues. And it mentions the locust, but not only that, it adds with the locust caterpillars. And so basically you think about a locust and you think about just different bugs that will eat moths and stuff like that will eat clothes and they'll eat all these things. So Psalm 105:34 says, he spake and the locust came and caterpillars, and that without number. Talking about this big plague of locusts and caterpillars. Isaiah 33:4 says, and your spoil, all right, that's the stuff that they have, the stuff that they've gathered. Your spoil shall be gathered like the gathering of the caterpillar, as the running to and fro of locusts shall he run upon them. Okay, so I'm just showing you there that locusts and caterpillars and all these kind of go together. Nahum chapter 3 verse 15, there shall the fire devour thee, the sword shall cut thee off, it shall eat thee up like the cankerworm. All right, which would be kind of like a moth, I believe some sort of moth, but and of all the moths that are out there, the tiniest moths are the ones that probably eating your clothes and leaving holes and doing all the damage and stuff like that. It's those little bitty moths, okay? Make thyself many as the cankerworm, make thyself many as the locust. Matthew 6:19 says this, lay not up for yourself treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, but rather lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where neither thieves break through or steal. I quoted that last part from memory, sorry. But you get the point. He's saying don't rely on things in this world that moths are just going to eat up. Just little bitty bugs, they're going to destroy your clothes. What about bees? What about bees? Braden just stepped on a bee yesterday. And that's what you get for going outside barefoot. No, I'm just kidding. You step on a bee. No, if you walk one bee, I mean, you find that probably like the worst bees out there, or hornets or wasps or whatever that sting you, one of them almost never kills anybody unless they got some really severe reaction to it. But a lot of times you don't come upon just one. A lot of times you come upon a whole nest of them, and they swarm around you, and then you run. People freak out when they see bees. And so the Bible talks about bees. It says in Deuteronomy 1, verse 44, and the Amorites, which dwell in that mountain, came out against you and chased you as bees do, and destroyed you in Seir, even unto Hormah. So, number one was that bugs in the Bible, the application is usually that they're insignificant in size. Also, there's an application that they have a surprising ability to spoil or ruin things. And even if they don't do that much damage in your mind, you think that they're pretty nasty and they're doing some damage. But the third thing is this. These insignificant seeming creatures, these bugs, they have a surprising ability to do some amazing things. If you really just watch what some of them are capable of doing. And so the Bible talks about the ants. Go to the ant. I think only a few times the word is used. So let's look at these two in Proverbs. Maybe that's the only times that they're used in Proverbs, but let's go there. Proverbs chapter 30. And look at verse 25. It says, the ants are a people not strong, yet they prepare their meat in the summer. Here's a whole list in this chapter of different animals. In fact, we're going to come back to it in a minute. But hold your place there and turn back to Proverbs 6. I was supposed to take you there first, but similar concept here. Proverbs 6, verse 6. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. So God's talking to lazy people and saying, hey, go to the ant and consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer and gathereth her food in the harvest. Proverbs 30, what we just looked at, says that there are people not strong. Now, I've heard this, that an ant, I think the ratio, they say that an ant can lift like 100 times its weight or something like that. And so you say, oh, wow, the ant is so strong. If there was an ant like our size, think about how strong he'd be. Yeah, but he's not our size. So even though an ant can lift 100 times its weight, if that's accurate or not, think about how small an ant are. You can get a whole colony of those things, and I don't care how strong they are. All you got to do is walk on them, squish, 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 and they're all dead because they're not very significant. Think about an ant. I mean, it's not. They don't seem to make much of a difference. They don't matter much. I did watch, we're talking about bugs that you can eat. I did watch something. This is just a little educational part of the sermon here. If you're ever stranded in the wilderness and you and you want a thickening agent, let's say you're cooking, maybe you find some dandelions. You're going to eat some dandelions. I sure would like some gravy with these dandelions. You can squash up a bunch of ants and boil that up, and you got a nice thickening agent. You got some like gravy for it. I'm not kidding. That's serious. I just don't know who would sit there and look at it. I mean, I'd have to be pretty hungry to look at ants and be like, maybe I can squash them and turn them into some kind of paste or something. All right, I'm not getting a lot of positive vibes in this sermon. All right, so, but think about it. They don't seem very significant, do they? But when you watch an ant and you're like, man, those are some hard-working creatures. I mean, they're just like, their job. And we understand God gave them instincts. They just do this. They don't know what else to do. But what God's saying is, He created these. We can look at them and we can learn. And we can say, wow, nobody has to tell. I know there's queen ants and stuff like that, carpenter, I don't know all the different types of ants there are, but these don't really have a leader cracking the whip saying, hey, you got to do this. They just know this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go out there and work and work and work, save a little money for a rainy day, because eventually, winter's coming and we're going to need some food. And so that's a great analogy there about the ants. Okay, not strong in, as far as what they're actually capable of doing. They have no guide, overseer, or ruler, yet they provide for the winter. All right, then back, you're still in Proverbs 30. Look at Proverbs 30, verse 28. The spider taketh hold with her hands and is in kings' palaces. Let me say a couple things about that, but first, for some strange reason, now old English translations of the Bible said spider, but then modern translations, they got this idea that the old English versions were wrong, and so they say, actually what it says is that you can pick up lizards with your hand, and they're in king's palaces. Well, I don't know where they got that, but the idea here, what I'm looking at, is saying there's spiders. Like, it doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter if you have maids that clean your house or whatever. At some point, you're going to end up with spider in there. Right? And so here are these spiders. They don't know what they're doing. They're just with their hands making webs. You ever watched them do that? And webs, man, are amazing to look at. I was reading that actually some spiders can shoot a web across an entire river or lake or whatever. And I know this because the trail that I run on, Prairie Spirit Trail. Now I would expect this in the Lehigh single track trail I run because the trees are close together. But on the Prairie Spirit Trail, sometimes I'll run and I'll think, oh good, I don't have to worry about spider webs here, because it's like 9 feet wide or something like that. And I'm running, and all of a sudden I've got not just like one little string, but I've got this entire web, and there's a spider on it. And if you're running and you're not paying attention, you're just like face is covered with this, and you're like, argh! And you spider on there, and look, that'll make a grown man scream like a girl. Not me, but I'm just saying some guys. But a spider web is amazing. Spiders, you think about it, they shoot liquid protein out of their abdomen or whatever, and it turns into a solid when it leaves their body. That's just an amazing thing that God did, and they've got these abilities to do that. And so humans only fantasize of being able to do that. Spider-Man, they're like, wow, that would be so neat to be able to do that, right? Because we look at the animal world and say, wow, how amazing. That little insignificant, creepy little creature can do some weird things. And then I didn't know this till I was studying it out, but some parts of the web aren't sticky. But the spider actually has 2 different glands. And one of the glands, they can somehow create this glue-like substance. And from what I understand, they often will leave the center part of the web not sticky, so that the bug can crawl around, the other creature can crawl around until it gets caught on the other sticky stuff. I don't know, it's kind of weird, but they have some ability to make that. In fact, scientists have looked at certain elements and they've tried to create, using what they've studied, and they broke down the chemistry of it and everything, and they've used that to be able to create liquid wire, I think is what they call it, liquid wire, right? And I don't know exactly what they're talking about. I do know they have these like 3D guns. Have you ever heard of that? It's kind of like a glue gun or something. 3D pins is what they're called. And so you put some kind of filament in there, and it hardens as it's coming out. And so that's kind of like a spider web. So, but whatever, I don't know, what they've come up with, but scientists have studied that, and they've tried to figure out how to imitate that. They've also looked at the sticky substance that the spider uses, and they've used that to create different types of glue and everything. But for a creature that seems so insignificant, so small, right? And for a creature that has the ability to destroy things, and they're nasty and they're creepy, and we don't want anything to do with it, but when we really study them, we just marvel that God created them with such intricate little details and so many things they could do. I remember watching, in science fiction movies, I've used bugs for a long time, because if you look at a bug through a microscope and you get really close up on their features, it looks like otherworldly. I mean, just like it's from another planet or something like that. So science fiction has used the way bugs look. So I remember watching this YouTube for a little while. I was watching these. It's called Monster Bug Wars. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that, okay? But basically they would just, it looks like, it's probably set up, but it looks like they just went out and they zoomed in with some kind of special lens, and they just got really close in this habitat and watched these insects fight it out, right? Just in nature. They probably set it up a little bit, I don't know, but and so like the praying mantis, every time there's a praying mantis, it doesn't matter who it's up against, that praying mantis is going to win, right? And so you watch this though, and they're so they magnify it so much, and you can see like all these features that they have, like on their arms. They have like these little ninja-looking spikes, and they can use that to cut their enemy. And I mean, it's weird. It's weird. So microscopic things here, and God made them with all these little details, and it's just amazing. Okay, so even though, he gave us these bugs for lots of reasons, even though it might seem like they're insignificant, he gave many bugs that help pollinate our gardens, bees and butterflies and all these. They kind of help us. Without those, it's been said that if we lost bees, that we would lose all of our food. The majority of our food would be lost if we didn't have bees. He uses them to decompose trash. Right, it turns all of the refuge. You think, wait a minute. In the winter, in the fall, we had leaves covered the ground, and in the summertime, all those leaves are gone. Where did they go? Well, the bugs broke them down into dirt, and the worms and different insects. And so God gave us all these for different reasons. He gave them, to be food for other animals or food for humans, if you like that kind of stuff. And he gave them all these other things. But we tend to look at them and think, man, they're pests, right? Perhaps part of the curse. I would think some of them are part of the curse. I'm sure mosquitoes was God's judgment on Adam, right? And so we think about this, but God gave us some great illustrations in the Bible and some great thoughts to consider as we think about the bugs. He's on a positive note, though they're small and they're weak, they can still prevail in numbers and in God's providence. And we can look at that in ourselves and say, sometimes, look at the children of Israel. What they should have done when those spies went into the promised land and said, oh, we're but grasshoppers. What they should have said is, hey, yeah, but look, God provides for the grasshoppers, and he gives them abilities to protect themselves. And look how numerous we are, like the grasshopper. So God gives us these little illustrations. As a negative, he shows us that, the tiniest little things in your life could be like an insect. They don't seem like a big deal, but they can cause corruption, like the flies in the ointment of the apothecary. How do you say it? Apothecary, thank you. I know I didn't say it right, but okay. And then we also can just learn, and the Bible even says, go to the ant, thou sluggard. So we can look at these creatures that God gave us, and we as humans have the ability to really dwell on that, focus on that, and learn from those things. I've mentioned before how the roundabouts that we all hate, because we'd rather have a stoplight. But they came up with this idea of roundabouts, and I've read and been told that they got that idea from seeing how ants create these super highways without any stoplights, and they said, maybe it can be done. And they came up with the roundabouts. Again, I talked about how spider webs and how we've looked at that chemistry and tried to create things for ourselves, and all these little things that seem so insignificant, but God put them here on for a reason. And just like we've seen all the animals in the Bible, right? Everything that God created is to glorify God. and to show his marvelous handiwork, that he's given us, and how much more, he puts into us, and he loves us and cares for us. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, thank you for your word and for all the illustrations, sometimes even exaggerations and powerful imagery in the Bible that teaches us great lessons. And I pray, Lord, that you'll help us realize that not only are we the most intelligent of the creatures that you've made, and you've given us the ability to have dominion over them and rule over all the creatures, but not only that, Lord, as Christians, being born again, having the Holy Spirit within us, we are of way more value to you than all of the other creatures in this world. And yet we look at how you take care of them, provide for them, have created them with such care. And I pray, Lord, that you'll just help this to grow our faith as we lean on you and we think of our place in this world. Lord, we thank you for all of this. In Jesus' name, amen. All right.